You were in that lifestyle from 19 to 29 for 10 years. And what was that moment where you said, hey, I need to start over?
Went to New York, got arrested. He ends up mugging me.
Wow.
Duct taped me, took my money, and then left me there.
It was at that moment, you're like, I need to move on. Practically, how did that leap look like in starting over?
So I started...
Hi there, welcome to The Leap of Faith, Stories of Starting Over. In this interview series, I'll speak with people who have faced life's toughest challenges and had the courage to start over. I'm your host, Joanna, and I'm also in the process of starting over. 4 years ago, I left the Silicon Valley tech life to move to Hawaii. Now I've returned to the Bay Area, starting this new chapter in my life. As I navigate my own transition, I want to share the journeys of others who've also had to embrace the unknown. So join me as I sit down with individuals who have taken a leap of faith and created their own path. Hey everyone, welcome to the next interview. Today I have my friend Hau'oli. Holi, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So to start, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
I want to lead with that I am a servant of Jesus Christ. I'm from here, Hawaii. I was brought up by loving parents, typical home in Hawaii. When I graduated from high school during those coming of age years, I wanted to seek out what the world had to offer. I had loving parents, but I didn't have so much knowledge of the world. So somewhat sheltered in some ways.
What would you say was a defining moment in your journey?
One experience that happened was I was out in Waikiki and I was like 18 years old, about 18 or 19, and I was out with my friends. I was like hanging around, quote unquote, with the wrong, bad crowd, and they were more knowing about street life and things like that than I was. So I was just around, and I would notice the prostitutes that would be walking, and of course there's other people out, right? But you see the same people right around. And then I remember, maybe I was in college actually at that time. I went to Chaminade for a very brief moment. I remember the next day I was in the grocery store and I saw one of the prostitutes that I would see, but I saw her in the daytime just buying produce. And I had like a Jesus moment, and the Jesus moment was, oh, she's just like everybody else. And so I made that human connection, right, with her or about her. That just got me thinking, like, it didn't make me think like, oh, I want to be a prostitute now. But it just gave me a conviction to like defend her as opposed to how people may judge her. Right. And then when I was going to Chaminade, we had to write some kind of essay, a persuasive essay. And I had written a persuasive essay about the benefits of prostitution. And it was from that moment. You're 18. Yes. Wow. And it was actually pretty good. I had, my arguments and my points, but I just wanted to mention that because like how the enemy can take something, right, that's not innocent, but like a moment of compassion, right? And then, but twist it, right? Kind of like twist my understanding. And so anyways, one night I was out late at night and I met this guy, and he was actually the same age as me. It didn't feel dangerous or anything like that at that moment. He gave me a ride home. We started a relationship. We'd hang out. He came from a family with uncles that were pimps and drug dealers, and that's what his family life was like. He wasn't necessarily one of those like young punks that like would watch something on TV and try to emulate it. That's just where he came from. Right. And so combined with my openness, that's how he turned me out into prostitution. I wasn't coerced, I wasn't abused. I was already open to so many different things, right? And I wanted that life. I wanted to be a part of, like kind of why people join gangs, right? You just want to be a part of something different than yourself. I obviously wasn't valuing what I was getting at home, and I didn't make that connection. So that's how I started the life that I lived for about 10 years.
So when did you start?
I was 19. I started off in hostess bars. So the thing about that lifestyle is less about sex as it is about using your mouthpiece, like talking and speaking to people, conversations. So that's what I was trained on first. I worked at hostess bars, I worked at massage parlors. It was kind of crazy, like back then. Like you'd walk into places that you didn't even know existed, but there would be like a line of 20 girls, and it would look like Vegas, but it was like in Honolulu. Like, and you would have all types of people. You would have, you know, business people. You have people you would see on TV. You know, you have all types, right? But just open, like an open business.
You mentioned the importance of conversing. Can you say more about that? Because I actually read somewhere that a lot of it's actually not about the sex, but about companionship, and people just want someone to be with.
Yeah, there was a term called girlfriend experience. So whenever somebody would say, oh yeah, she gives a girlfriend experience, that means she provides more of that like type of companionship.
So you were in that lifestyle from 19 to 29 for 10 years. And are you comfortable sharing how old you are now?
Oh yeah, 46.
Okay, so that was about 17 years ago.
Good with math, but
So, you know, nearly 2 decades ago.
Yeah.
What was it about it that kept you in that lifestyle?
Yeah, so the false sense of freedom, because if I needed my bills paid, if I would just call somebody. You know, I could wake up and do whatever I wanted, pretty much. You're trading off like the freedom of like right now for like, or trading off the freedom for later, right, of my future. Because it does have its costs, right?
What are your convictions about that work?
It's something that I can see how sex and money are used and are misappropriated. In reality, both parties are seeking not those things, right? They're really seeking wholeness. They're really seeking security.
So you were in the game for 10 years. What was that moment where you said, hey, I need to start over?
I went through so many, like, literally real life series of unfortunate events. There was a number of years I was already into this lifestyle where nothing happened. And all of a sudden I take this trip. Within not maybe like a little over a month span, I was caught up in a raid, which wasn't that big of a deal once you're like used to it. But that means I had to move, or I had to try somewhere else. So caught up in a raid, went to Atlanta, had my things taken, was left for stranded in a South Atlanta motel, and had everything taken from me. By the grace of God, I believe like a real angel like saved me and was able to drive me close to where my boyfriend at the time was. Right after that, went to New York, got arrested. Then right after that, I go to New Jersey. I hang out with a guy friend. He ends up mugging me.
Wow.
Duct taped me, took my money, and then left me there. So like this is like boom, 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 boom. Here's the crazy part when it comes to like what your convictions are and what you're still trying to pursue. You would think, okay, girlie, just pack up and go home, right? I mean, goodness, right? But there was still something in me that wanted to pursue what I set out to do, which was to make a bunch of money. And then I went to Arizona where I was working for this older lady. And here's another revealing thing. At the time, like you wouldn't believe, the people, like the pimps or madams, they were like little old ladies. Like it's crazy. They did ice, and I think they sold ice, but I wasn't aware of it. At one of the other places that I was at in Atlanta, I remember this girl telling me the story, how she would work for these people. She said they're known to drug girls, especially girls that are already on heroin, already crackheads or whatever. They're known to drug them, make them work, take their money, and do whatever with them. I just heard this story not that long ago, maybe a couple weeks before, and then I realized, oh crap, like I'm here. I'm in that scary, like a state, a totally different state, but this is exactly where she was talking about. And so I was really afraid. I felt like, I should get out, but I still needed to make something. And so before I could do that, I think I had a little bit of money, but and praise God, it was like where I was located, it was a straight shot from the airport. So I knew that I could just go down that one boulevard and I'll be at the airport. It was like a horror movie. Like it really felt like a horror movie.
So scary.
At night I was shaking, and I knew that Jesus was the only name I could call on.
Okay.
I don't know how I knew that, but I was just like, I just have to call in. So I was in the bed like that night, and I was like scared, and I just like, Jesus, like help me get out of here.
Yeah.
And then the next day he made a way. So the next day I went outside to smoke weed with him. When we went back in the house, I got a phone call from my friend. It was a guy friend who I haven't heard from in how long.
Yeah.
I tell him I'm like in town, so I make like he's in the same state, but he's nowhere near me. But I'm talking as if he's close, if I'm close by to him, but just to present some kind of like protection. And by the way, while I'm having this conversation, the guy that stays there, he's changing my doorknob to a deadbolt, like in front of me.
Wow.
He's doing this. So anyway, they say, oh, is that a girlfriend? Why don't you have her come and work with us? I said, no, it's a guy. And as soon as I said that, the guy like shut his toolbox from changing the doorknob, and then he bounced, he left. And then right after that, I looked on the oven clock and it said 1, 2, 3, 4. And so I knew it was like, go. I was still scared she was gonna lock me in there. So I like threw out my stuff and then decided to proceed to get out of there. But anyways, that did shake and, you know, really rock my belief system to the core. I knew that was the message that I was supposed to get.
Yeah. So then it was at that moment, you're like, all right, I have to stop. Like I need to move on. So what did that look like? So you had this moment and you said, okay, I need to move on. You're in Arizona. What did you do after that? Like practically, how did that leap look like in starting over?
So I started trying to figure out, okay, what could I do with my life?
So were you back home in Hawaii?
I was, I came back home to Hawaii. I was trying to think, okay, what could I do with my life, you know, or what should I do? I was always into natural things, but I was also into skincare because, you know, in that lifestyle, you are, you know, hip to beauty and, you know, you buy a lot of like beauty products and things like that. Practically speaking, being an esthetician, becoming one, getting that license is a short duration to get your license. So as far as education goes, it's a short duration. You can get into it and make just as much right away as somebody who's been doing it for a long time.
What message would you give to younger girls who are teenagers?
One thing that I tell mothers, how would a young person allow themselves to do that, right? And the one thing that I observed was that once sex doesn't have a value and once you're too easy to give it up, it's like if you ever slept with somebody who you weren't really into, but either pressure, obligation, not like coerced or rape, but I'm just saying like social obligation, and that happens a lot, you know, more than you would think, then it's easy to do it for money then.
So it's the value. The
value. It's easy. Like once you don't value sex like in its sanctity, you know, in marriage and things like that, then it's easy. Because if it's like, okay, if I was able to have sex with somebody who I barely liked, I might as well go, you know, have sex and get money for it. You know.
So what are your views on sex now? What are your views on sex in terms of the biblical views of it only should be for marriage?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, because that's where it can live its purpose. Like it has a purpose. Like God purposed it.
But going back to your journey of kind of rebuilding and restarting, so you went to esthetician school. What was the hardest part about starting over and going through that transformation?
That time wasn't hard because I was in that like honeymoon phase with the Lord too.
Okay, yeah.
You know, so
you found Jesus.
I found Jesus, and there was so many synchronicities.
Sometimes you have to hit those rock bottom moments for God to hit you and be like, no, you need to get through this. So that's what I tell people. It's like when you hit rock bottom, it's not a gift, but sometimes you need to hit that to be, or else you might have stayed in that lifestyle.
Yes.
It sounds like you've been through so much and you've had to restart, but you see God's hand in your life. And where would you say you're at today?
So I am aspiring to be an entrepreneur. Well, I am an entrepreneur. I have my own business, skincare business. I love organic products, like I mentioned. Throughout my career, I've grown into learning about different technologies as well. So that's what I like to provide in my services. However, I also see myself getting into other things like writing. Like that's actually been on my heart. I really feel like as far as like God definitely God assignment. It is like writing, like whether it's a book, or, who knows what kind of form it's gonna take. But definitely my testimony, definitely the things that I've learned along the way. The one thing I would regret is time, right? Like any loss of time. So that's what I'd want to do, is save someone else the time. Even when I was putting together my website and I was writing something, I think it was my about page. I started tearing up. And it wasn't like just a simple like sentimental experience. It was like spiritually powerful. Like I was like, oh wait, I'm supposed to be doing this. So anyways, that's what I definitely want to have time for, and I'd rather most of my time be given to that, to expressing myself, my story, whatever God wants me to share, is through that creative writing process.
And I want to encourage you, because so I think it's amazing, like what you're doing now, esthetician, but your passion for writing, and how you said you started tearing up when you even wrote the About Me page. Like, God puts those desires on our hearts. I strongly believe when you tell your story, you give a voice to other people who can't articulate theirs. And other people, they're waiting on your writing. They're waiting on your story, because that brings healing to others. It's funny, like I'm tearing up now, but you're like when I write, I started crying. It's like, I feel that way when I create content. I've like cried so much over my content, but it's like, it's kind of weird. It's like, even the opportunity to be like, hey, Joanna, like, you want to try your best to like elevate other stories. You want to like tell your story and like give hope to other people. God puts those desires in your heart, and you will start tearing up, and that is a sign from God, because it's not about like you making money or you being famous. Your words, like, people are waiting on that, and it doesn't matter if it's one person or 1 million. It's like,
I believe
that's what means it. I feel like when I see people in those moments when they're like, this is what I know I need to do, and like I'm tearing up and I know God has that for me, I'm always like, you need to do that. Like, I don't know, God put that gift in you. Like, He gave you your testimony and your story, and it's like, it's so powerful, everything you've had to overcome, and that wasn't just for you. It's so you can be a voice for other people. I just needed to like get on that soapbox and feel like I felt like emotion in me coming out. I was like, oh, this is so real. I wanted to ask you like 2 other questions. These are kind of my signature questions, but what's the biggest lesson you've learned through starting over, and how has it shaped the person you are today?
And most impactful thing that stood out to me in starting over is that I can. It's the grace.
You go, girl. No, we can all do it. Don't worry. That's the message for you. Like, look in the camera. You can start over.
It's like even that opportunity to start over. That's like, once you realize that, that's like really sobering. Jesus always says like, repent, right? Like, just change your thinking, and change your perspective too. And that gratitude too. The gratitude, and even just the ability to be appreciative.
I once heard a quote: the day you plant the seed is not the day you see the fruit.
Absolutely.
Like, even starting over, sometimes you're not going to see fruit for a few years maybe, but you have to believe that you're doing the right thing. And especially in America or Western culture, we live in a society of instant gratification. So it's like, oh, you left the game. All right, the next, like within 2 months, you should be completely out and have like a steady job. It's like, maybe that can happen, but maybe it might take some time. Here's the thing about starting over. I once heard it's like, you have to be willing to let go of this lifestyle and be a beginner and start new, and just be open to that and be like, all right, I have to learn from ground zero, and I'm not above that. Just being like, all right, I left this, I left something I was good at or I was an expert in, and I am gonna start over, and I'm gonna start from ground zero. There's a certain amount of humility that it takes that not everyone has, because people are like, oh, I can't leave this. You don't have to have all the answers figured out. You just gotta be like, well, I'm gonna try.
Yeah, but I like what you said about the seed thing too, because not only like does it take some time, but like the type of fruit God wants us to have is fruit that remains.
That's true.
So it's not just about it manifesting, but for it to, withstand a lot of other things.
Okay, final question. So what's one thing you would tell someone who's facing a major life challenge or feeling stuck, but is too afraid to take that first step?
You don't have to until you're ready. But get ready. But get ready, do whatever you have to do to get ready.
Thank you so much for your time, sharing your story.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for joining. And we hope you stay tuned for the next interview where I share the stories of more people who take a leap of faith and start over.
Duct taped me, took my money, and then left me there. So like this is like boom, 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 right? And so after that, and here's the crazy part when it comes to like what your convictions are and what you're still trying to pursue. You would think, okay, girlie, just pack up and go home, right? I mean, goodness, right? But there was still something in me that wanted to pursue what I set out to do, which was to make a bunch of money and get us back together.
Yeah.
It sounds stupid and foolish, but it's like, it's crazy how you know, what you allow to influence you, and even the atmosphere or like the surrounding mentality, right? Because at that time I was